So this is part 3 of the mollusk notes, and we're talking about class Bivalvia. Bi meaning two, valve relating to the shells. So all of these will have two shells to them. So things like clams, oysters, shipworms, and scallops. So bivalves, like I said, they have two shells. They have very strong muscles that can open and close these shells. They are filter feeders, so they just kind of filter out microscopic food from the water. They are the only mollusks without a radula and without cephalization, so they don't really have a head area. They do have a mouth, sort of, but they don't have a head. They don't have any sense organs like that. They do have open circulation. They have indirect development with the trochophore larva. They are sessile as adults, so they don't really move around much. They can burrow. They'll burrow into sand, wood, and rocks. So on your note sheet, you'll want to write down just the major ideas here from this slide. The shells are secreted by glands in their mantle, and these glands also keep the inside of the shell smooth by secreting a substance known as mother of pearl, and that's why it looks that kind of rainbowy, shiny white color. If an object gets caught inside, like a grain of sand, the mantle will cover it with the mother of pearl, and it'll develop into a pearl, and that's how we get pearls from oysters. And sometimes they do this purposefully. They actually put grains of sand inside of oysters so that they can secrete the mother of pearl over it and create a pearl to sell. Bivalves are very important because you can use them to help monitor the environment. Since they're filter feeders, they're not just filtering food out of the water, but they're filtering pollutants as well. And scientists can measure the level of these pollutants or other microorganisms that can make people sick and figure out what the health of the environment is exactly. So you'll want to label your first diagram. You should probably pause the video so you can label all the important parts. So this is the second diagram that you have for labeling. You'll probably want to pause the video so you can label all the structures properly. Please take your time looking to see where the locations of all these things are, because when we dissect our clam, you will have to be able to identify these. Notice how on the right-hand side you have an incurrent and excurrent, and they don't tell you what incurrent and excurrent. Those are siphons, and those are the places where the clam would like draw water in and push water out, and you will be finding those in the dissection. So maybe on your diagram you could label incurrent and excurrent siphon, S-I-P-H-O-N. But definitely make note of where their heart is. You can see the intestine runs right next to it, and you can see the pericardial cavity, which is also going to be called the coelom. That's where it's keeping its major organs there. You can see where the stomach is toward the left-hand side. It does have a mouth at the front end that you're going to have to find in our dissection as well. Here are just a couple diagrams showing you different types of mollusks and how they would use their siphons to be able to filter water and stay safe at the same time. They can bury themselves completely in the sand. This is showing you just the interior and exterior view of their shell. If you take a look at the top picture, you can see where it's labeling the umbo. That's kind of where there's like the bump on the outside of the shell. And believe it or not, there is a right side and a left side to the shell. And when we do the lab, you will have to identify where this umbo is. And then based on that, you can figure out where the anterior and the posterior end of this clam is, because they don't really have a head that you can identify. So they use certain parts like that. The anterior end is where its mouth will be located. On the inside of the shell, you'll see where they have muscle attachment areas to the shell, you're going to have to cut these muscles to get the shells open, because when they're preserved closed, and you're going to have to cut these muscles, and it's very challenging, and you're going to have to be very careful. And depending on, I haven't looked at our samples yet, but I may need to come around and help open some of them with a screwdriver, just so that you can get in there. Most of the time they leave them propped open with a piece of wood, but we'll see how they look this year. Here's an example of the giant clam and a burrowing clam. We may have time in class to watch the Dirty Jobs episode on gooey ducks, and that's what you're seeing there on the right hand side. They call that type of a clam a gooey duck. I don't remember why they call them that, but that long stretch is their siphon, and that's actually where they actually use that for food. They'll cut that, and people can use that for food. All right, one of the pests of the mollusk world are the zebra mussels. And I'm not sure if you pay attention, but there's a lot of zebra mussels in our Great Lakes. They are not native to the Great Lakes. They are considered an invasive species. And they have changed the environment and the ecology of the Great Lakes, and they've started to endanger other types of native species there. So zebra mussels are considered an environmental pest. They came in the ballast water of ships from Europe in 1986. So they're a very recent pest. Ballast water is how the ships can float higher or deeper in the water. They fill the ballast tanks with water, and they just use the water that they're floating in. So if there's organisms in there, they get taken in as well. So that's kind of how they were accidentally transported into the Great Lakes. But what they do is they secrete an adhesive, they call it a byssal thread, and it's a very sticky substance that helps them stick together to each other and to rocks and other substrates, including man-made objects like pipes and plumbing. So they're causing a problem not just for the native species, but for humans as well. You have to be careful if you're walking out in the lake that you don't step on them, because their shells are extremely sharp, so they can cut your feet pretty good. They do live in high densities. They usually clump together. They feed on phytoplankton, and they can reproduce very rapidly, so they can take over other native species, habitats, and food sources, and put them on the endangered list very quickly. Look at how they've attached to the native mussels, and this allows or doesn't allow those mussels to open or close their shell properly, and then they die. This is a very old, this is from 2002. The distribution of them. I'm sure it's much more widespread across the country at this point, because the majority of our waterways are connected in some way. So I'm sure that the distribution of these zebra mussels are much farther at this point than they were originally. All right, oysters. Oysters, we know, are those mollusks that can create pearls, and pearls tend to be on the expensive side. It does require the sacrifice of an oyster to get the pearl out. You can't just open them, take it out, and then close them again. When you take it out and harvest the pearl, you destroy the oyster. Pearl formation, like we said before, an irritant gets lodged between the shell and the mantle, and instead of calling it mother of pearl, the more science word is nacre, N-A-C-R-E, and it's secreted around the foreign material to keep it soft and smooth so it doesn't hurt the organism. Then we move on to scallops. Scallops are a food. The top picture might be the most familiar to you. The bottom one is what a scallop looks like. And these guys are kind of neat. I'll see if I can find the video for class on these guys. They can protect themselves by closing their shell really tight with strong muscles and forcing water out. And they propel themselves out of danger that way. And they're kind of neat. They're almost like an underwater butterfly in a way, the way that they open and close their shell, they kind of float around and move around to escape predators. Here's another pest in the mollusk world. This is called a shipworm, and they create lots of holes in wood, so they can be quite a problem for those ships that are still made of wood. Giant clam image. They can be pretty big, like 1,000 pounds. There's a giant clam next to a person. You can see it's quite a sizable thing. So now that you're hungry for shellfish, this takes us to the end of this set of videos. And there's one more that covers the cephalopods. So if you want to take a break and pick up later, or you can just continue right into the next set of notes, I'll leave that up to you.